Hello everybody in YouTube land and welcome! This video I'm recording during the week of Arkham Horror, where if you do not know, the design team for Arkham Horror the card game did an AMA on Reddit. I really enjoy when the designers do these AMAs because we kind of get some insight into them as designers and also what's going on with as much as they can tell us for Arkham Horror the card game. What I do with these is I go through, I read some stuff, I react to that stuff, and I kind of just share my thoughts and opinions on things because that is what content creation is all about. This one is a little bit different than the previous ones. There was one that Duke did, one that Nick did, and then now there is one that is all three of them. So we have Nick, Duke, and then also the new designer, who was a freelance screenwriter, graphic novelist, who is now part of the Arkham Horror design team. So there's three of them going to be answering questions. And this one is A. Reed Bradshaw, which I think we'll just call Reed for short for him. I'm not too sure. But also, Liv might answer some questions here too, but we're just going to go through and get this going. So let's see. Alright, how will the legacy and current environments address player cards with the taboo list moving forward? Will the Arkham Horror LCG team still try to maintain the taboos list for legacy player cards, or moving forward will the taboo list only be focused on adding player cards to the current environment? We'll keep the taboo list for legacy cards, sure, but the taboo list may shift and morph as environments shape how players play the game. It's a nebulous answer, but that's because I think we're trying to stay aware of the community and how they are playing the game. The taboo is an answer to that. So I guess really the answer to that one is just like, we don't know what's going to happen, but yes, there's likely going to be changes to the taboo list. I mean, basically the taboo list is still going to be a thing. It's going to be one of those things where I imagine they just monitor it and they kind of just see how it goes. So this is a whole new ground for the game to be heading on, so it makes sense that it's best to just stay reactive and not set anything specific in stone. After a few open-ended campaigns, what led to the decision to make the Drowned City more linear or traditional? How does the decision to have a traditional campaign versus open world or any order affect scenario and overall narrative design? I've shared this in interviews, but originally Drowned City was much more open-ended. There was a desire to let players freely explore the city with a massive 100 doom clock that would change scenarios. So I have to make sure I have this for you guys here. Kind of like the time mechanic in the Scarlet Keys. After trying this for some time, however, we decided that it was better to scale back to a more approachable and controlled structure. The concept, however, is still one I'd love to revisit in a future project if we have the occasion to do so. As to your second question, the open world design does make narrative very difficult to control. Hemlock was a bit easier in this regard because there was a very predictable 3-day structure, so there's always that push and pull, giving players freedom and giving players too much freedom for it to be fun or intuitive. More variance makes it a lot tougher to make a coherent story. That seems neat. I think I've never heard of this this part where the originally Drowned City was open and had like a giant doom clock. I think that's a really cool concept for a campaign. With all that said, I am happy that Drowned City was very linear and also kind of just simple. I know there's a lot of criticism that Drowned City gets for being very simple, but I'm personally a big fan of how simple it is. And I think that this was a nice choice, but this is a neat idea that I would love to see kind of done more in the future. Alright, now that current standard whatever is a format, a little bit snarky. A little bit snarky. That's okay, we can be snarky. We can have a little bit of snark if we want to be a little bit snarky. What do you see the identities of various classes as being? I find myself confused by Guardian specifically, where every character seems to do a different and unrelated thing. Alright. This is a neat question, and I think all three of the designers answered this one. Yeah. Alright. From Duke, that's an excellent question. I think the game has definitely morphed and evolved over the years, and so have the classes. We've had many discussions as a design team about where we'd like to take them, and I think the overall consensus is that we'd like to spend the next stretch of development redefining and fleshing those out. There's way more that I can go into here, but okay, before I get to the other ones, I think that's a good philosophy. They have this opportunity to explore what classes are, and they can do this through product that is already existing and also potentially new products going forward. I said this to chat. Actually, I'm not going to cover that here. So Guardian should always be a bit more setup intensive, with a reliance on taking hits, teamwork, and hitting enemies harder than others. Seekers should be good at getting clues, drawing cards, and finding what they want. Rogues are the movement and efficiency class. They specialize in evading enemies and should want to keep them around, either to fleece them for resources or other means. So this actually sounds like, to me, a bigger shift than what rogues were for a while. And I'm not saying that I think that this is a bad shift or necessarily a good shift, but this just feels like that, because at least to me, rogues have always seemed like the combo class, and I guess like that is kind of efficiency. Efficiency, I think, is also a nice difference than what rogues were before. And I think the idea is that they are good at getting the job done. And I think them being better at movement than Seeker is also really good. Again, though, all three designers are answering this question, so we're going to go with that as well. But I think, yeah, like Tony, Trish are very efficient investigators. I mean, I even think Preston is efficiency, right? Like, he's also, like, reliable, which is kind of like something that I don't really expect, but the answer for efficiency to me also could be reliable. They're very reliable at what they do, and that's something that has kind of become more current rogue as opposed to past rogue. Mystics are second to Guardians in their need to set up, but generally we always try to make Mystics feel more equipped against treacheries, than that they can break the game in cool ways, like with Transfiguration. Survivors break the mold. They're intended to play with failure, surviving by the skin of your teeth, and turning bad situations into good. I'd also like to see us expand into a more literal take on surviving off the land, subsisting in the wilderness, etc., etc. All right, from Nick here. Thanks for the question. Duke already gave a great answer, but also provided my thoughts on the class identity. In a cooperative faction-based game, I think it's important for every class to be able to handle everything the game throws at them, as long as it's doing so in a way that feels true to the class. This is 100% the way it should be. So I'm very much resonating with this answer so far. Can Guardians get clues? Sure, but their methods aren't as consistent or as fast as those of Seekers. Can Seekers handle enemies? Yes, but they might struggle with enemies with larger health pools. We want to make choosing which class and investigator to play always be an interesting choice, regardless of player count. That being said, we're always keeping the strengths and weaknesses of each class in mind. We don't want every class to replace every skill test in the game with a skill which they're best at, for instance. That would level the playing field so much as to make both designing the cards and playing them quite boring. I like this answer because I do think that this is a good kind of bounce off of Duke's answer, where Duke's answer is kind of setting up, here is what like their design space is, and then Nick is saying, but in that design space, just because, for example, Rogue is best at movement doesn't mean other classes aren't going to get movement options, but Rogues are just going to be like the king of movement in comparison to other people. I'm not sure I feel that everybody can do anything in a Lovecraftian universe. Yeah, but so, Miranda, there's a big difference between that and, like, good game design. This is something that happened in Magic, and it happened in Seeker for a very long time, too. So Magic, with their blue class, were very good at drawing cards, right? And Seekers were very good at getting cards. Like, they were just drawing cards and being the only one who could draw cards. But the game became better when everybody was able to draw cards, but Seekers were just the best at drawing cards. Drawing cards isn't a thing that people do in real life, right? Just because everybody can draw cards doesn't mean that it's the same sort of idea that anybody can do anything, because card draw is a design thing, not a flavor thing, right? And design-wise, everyone should be able to do the same thing, but there should be like people who are very good at it and people who are bad at it, but they'll take it because it makes their deck more consistent. All right, and here's one from Reed. Okay, FFG Reed, so we can call him Reed. All right. Seems like it's my turn to weigh in on this one. I think class identities are a really complex subject, and a full picture would take a lot of reference to specific mechanics and more space than we have in this comment section, but I can at least talk through a bit of the ways I think about classes from a top-down ethos sort of perspective. Disclaimer, this is just how I personally think of the classes. Don't take it as gospel. Goss is whatever ways the full team end up coming as consensus on any given aspect of the game. Guardians. Sorry, I'm so zoomed in over here that I keep losing track of it. So sorry if I ever scroll up or scroll down too far. Guardians are the ultimate support class. They're great at fighting, but they fight to protect people rather than for personal glory / rewards. They tank hits well and can tank for their allies. They also should have great ways to boost team economy, performance, healing, etc. Reliability is the name of the game. I think that's a good summary of the Guardians thing. I think that like support is a little bit strange for like a total title for the Guardian class, because I do think that I think that the 3 answers do a really good job of showcasing the complexities of design, right? Where like they all kind of gave slightly different answers, which shows that the perspectives, I think it's like what Reed says at the start here is 100% accurate, right? It's where they all live. And I feel like a lot of people miss the combat Guardians, but it's right here. They're great at fighting, but they fight to protect people rather than their own personal glory rewards. Like, it's like such a complex thing, but I think this is a great answer for like what the philosophy of the Guardian design should be. Seekers are the opposite, very self-focused. Clues are them, which is funny because they started as actually like a super supportive class in theory, but that was kind of lost to the philosophy of that, well, not the philosophy, the consequence of Seeker cards being so good, right? So I would love to actually them not be self-focused and go back to the support Seeker style, because I think they also were started as a very supportive class. Clues are their main job, and though every class should have a good card draw, they have a particular high amount. They can generate a lot of value and progression for the team, but are quite vulnerable and generally need protecting. Rogues are our first of our 3 flex classes. Their actions are big, bursty, always have a chance of failure, where Guardian and Seeker might reliably chunk away with good compression and good stat values. Rogue put a lot in to get a lot out, and risk busting in the process. All classes should have good resource gen, but Rogues particularly have the highest amount. Interesting. I mean, I don't disagree. I'm just thinking, like, with these 2 things, we have, like, what I would love to have seen in this answer as well is also what the Guardians had over the other class, right? I think that is what I would love to see in the philosophy here, because we see Rogue, good at card draw, Seeker, good at resources. I think we all agree that they should be the best at it, but I would love to then have known also what Guardians would be the best at. Right? And I think the answer is support is not, I guess, sorry, I'm not showing them. I think the answer support isn't really like a mechanical answer. So I just would love to have seen, just because I like the perspectives here. And I'd be curious to see what Reed would say is Guardians apex in the design, in the color pie, in the class color pie, so to speak. Mystics are all about costs. Everything can be a cost. Charges, resources, damage, horror, XP, even trauma. They also work with a certain amount of risk, with spells and assets that have a chance to backfire and hurt them, messing around with game elements that are inherently dangerous like Doomer enemies, and always the possibility of running out of charges and being temporarily helpless. Mystics get nothing for free, but in exchange what they do is powerful and very unique. Great answer. I think that's I love it. They're black. They can do, sorry, let me specify further. They are black from Magic the Gathering, which is like everything, greatness at any cost, right? And I think that's very much Mystics. It's a cliche to say at this point, but Survivors is in the name, but it's true. Survivors can make a lot out of little, with Recursion helping them amp up the value of a single card in various ways to offset failure or other losses. They should always be scraping by, burning cards and actions and disposable assets to stay up and ahead and keep powering through. I think this is a good answer, but I do hope that Survivor Recursion is kind of left greatly powered down, because Recursion is, as we see, has been a very problematic thing in the game. But I think those are great answers to the question. I think the time period and theming for the game is perfect, but if you could apply the game mechanics to a different theme or time period, what would those be? So many great options. I'd love to take Arkham to the Old West, or forward into World War II, or even further back in time to ancient Rome. I'd love to play around with Arkham in the 1980s, bring on the Stranger Things ET vibe. There are so many good options, though I'm curious how my fellow designers would answer. Duke and Nick have already covered the big ones, but I think as a big fan of the sci-fi side of the mythos and the way Cosmic Horror maps to space incredibly well, I have to say a distant future setting would also be a blast. I like these answers. I think that While there will always be mechanical dissonance, depending on the time frame, if they do want to jump forward or backwards, I think Dark Matter has shown that players are willing to accept a little bit of... they're willing to expect highly fictitious reasonings for things and enjoy it. Because really, I think the big thing that I always say for, like, when people say it's not realistic to have a gun in this time period, I'm like, yeah, but, like, you guys know Cthulhu's not real, right? Like, I would love, like, a weird Wild West. Sounds like a fun thing to try out. Yeah, exactly. Suspension of disbelief is a wonderful way to experience things. All right, I'm way too zoomed in for my own perspective on this. I'm going to zoom out slightly so I don't keep losing you guys, because I feel like I keep scrolling too far and we kind of, like, lose you guys a bit. Let's go like that. Okay. Alright, full campaigns are obviously the core of the game, with the occasional scenario that can be weaved into existing campaigns. But has there been any discussion, and what are your thoughts about content that is between these extremes? For example, maybe 3 to 4 scenarios with a tighter focus and more options to have wild and wacky mechanics, and perhaps with even more narrative options, such as exploring a haunted house where each scenario is a floor, and the last scenario is the basement, or whatever, and the choices made in the first 3 scenarios have substantial impact on how the last scenario plays out. Yeah, I think that that's a neat concept, and we've always at least said here, it'd be cool to see them kind of explore the format of campaigns as we know them. While this verges on stuff I can't talk about, I will say that I think that's a great idea. We definitely have discussed the possibility of getting variable campaign sizes in front of the players. Okay, okay. As I've said elsewhere, just about any idea the community might, scroll down too far, might come up with that could be cool for the Arkham Horror has likely already been discussed by the team. We talk about this game a lot and we're always trying to innovate. As a personal anecdote, the experimental product vision I submitted as part of my original job application was a 3-scenario box with a very specific locational theme. So campaigns of varying sizes and scales are definitely on our radar, and I'd still love to make that campaign particular someday if the opportunity arises. Nice. I like it. I like it. Why is this down so far? Let me... No, that's just actually the bottom. Okay. Let's go like... Okay, I want it like there. That's what with my brain when I'm reading. There we go. When you design campaigns, do you try to cater for those who will play them many times over, or are you more focused on giving a great first playthrough, even if that means the player's decks will not be optimized or prepared for the specific challenges of each scenario? Great question, huh? It's a balance, yeah? A lot of people only play a campaign once, and it's important to make sure that a first play is impactful, interesting, and hits the right narrative beats. This is why there is a canon playthrough of Hemlock Vale, for instance. Just follow Dr. Marquez, and the ending of that story is what I'd call the true ending of the campaign, even if it requires you to jump through some hoops. You only ever get one first blind playthrough of a campaign, and we want it to stick with you. However, the format of a larger box campaign means we can play around with the structure. I'd like to make a campaign that feels the players feel they can return to again and again and to still discover new things. So, I mean, to sum it up, we try to balance both aspects. I mean, that's like the expected answer, right? They want it to be interesting on the first play and replayable. I think that, at least to me, as a gamer for Arkham, the things that make stuff replayable is just like scenarios with slight variance. So, like, I think like the Catacombs deck is a good example of that kind of replayability. And even people who might disagree with the fact that Written in Rock, the minecart scenario in Hemlock Vale, a lot of people hate that scenario, and, you know, more power to you if you don't like it, right? Like, I'm not going to say that you're wrong for disliking the scenario. You're allowed to have your own opinions. But I like that there is some variance to the way that the minecarts, like the mineshaft locations, are put into the board. That's the kind of stuff that I really like for replayability. So I think that that's a good way to approach that kind of thing. If you could redesign the rule set of this game from scratch, which fundamental parts would you change or improve upon with the knowledge and hindsight you've gained from playing or designing the game? A tasty question. If I got my pick, I'd want to add in a charisma or influence stat corresponding to a class based around that. I'd like to give them a more concrete way to play for players to parlay and chat with the enemies, as that's how I often play RPGs myself. Yeah, I think Duke mentioned this in the first AMA, and I think that's a neat answer. This is a great question. For my own part, this is more about establishing precedent than it is changing the bones of the game. But I would have built the game to have more expected modularity across difficulty levels and across player accounts. I think my ideal version of Arkham Horror would have always made such concessions, providing smaller encounter decks or smaller maps for lower player counts, and larger maps or a thicker deck against larger player counts. I think that's also a really good answer with the hindsight of what we have for the game now. Truthfully, I think the game's core rules are incredibly robust. There's very little I'd want to change from the ground up level, maybe some tweaks to later implementation at most. I do really like Duke's idea of having Parlay be more fundamental to the game, though, and I think it could be cool if spells were a more general card type rather than locked primarily to one class. A favorite detail of Eldritch Horror for me was the fact that anyone could become a spellcaster regardless of their stats through a mix of book collecting and luck. From a class identity perspective, on the other hand, I would love to see Mystic be the movement class rather than Seeker. Seeker has enough core mechanics in the class identity they can stand to give a few away. I mean, I would not be upset if Seekers lost their movement, and it sounds like they're going to, so yay. Nobody talking about things like the confusion of evade or the disconnect of 1 damage versus 1 clue. Yeah, do you want to know the why they're not talking about it? Because it really doesn't matter. Like, I understand that it bothers people and it is annoying, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't actually matter. It's a bummer that it happens, but like, what is it actually doing to hurt the game apart from causing confusion? And it's only causing confusion. I would say that it's causing confusion to people who are looking for confusion as opposed to people who are just playing the game. And maybe that's an opinion that a lot of people are going to disagree with me on, but I do feel like stuff like that is fine to want changed, but it actually matters to the designers less because they're just they're working on like a different level than the players looking for confusion are. Because the evade, 1 damage, 1 clue, it's certainly not intuitive, but I do think that the vast majority of people aren't having the problems that people say they are having problems with it about. I think the people who are pointed out, again, are looking for something to freak out about, and they are finding that thing to freak out about. Now that you're designing for a current environment, how are you finding it? Is it what the team had hoped for? I've been posting several decks made out of... Okay. Not to discredit the thing, I want to just get the question. I'm going to be doing a lot of talking today. It is freeing to design with a smaller card pool in mind, and it also forces us to think of the products in their own silos. We were not designing with this paradigm in mind with Hemlock, mind you, but it came clear through design, then testing where we needed to make the box focused on Blessed Curse that would stand on its own even if the players did not own the Innsmouth Conspiracy. Glad to hear you're enjoying deck building with new environments. I always like to keep my pet decks that I build in a specific time and card pool on hand because it's fun to return to them from time to time, but I've also had a lot of fun working with a more limited environment. Designing for current has helped us ease up some of the pressure, but the pressure isn't gone entirely. Every card we design needs to also have legacy in mind as well. Interesting. Every card we design needs to also have legacy in mind as well. I thought the intention for this was that it wouldn't be the case, that they would have to think about legacy for this kind of stuff. Any new one-handed melee weapon in Guardian is going to get compared to Machete, even if we're designing it primarily with new cards in mind. Also, we want new cards to be appealing to all players, current or legacy alike. Every so often, however, when a card design hits all the right notes for mechanics and theme and class identity, we just tend to go with it, even if it compares favorably or unfavorably to a card that already exists in Legacy. Okay, I need to take a look at this one. Designing for current has helped ease us from the pressure. The pressure has gone entirely. Every current design needs to also have legacy in mind as well. Any new one-handed weapon in Guardian is going to get compared to Machete, even if we're designing it primarily with new cards in mind. Also, we want new cards to be appealing to all players, current or legacy alike. Okay. I mean, maybe they're just trying to say that, like, they don't want to just, like, make a new machete? I don't know. Because I thought the intention of the current was to not have to, like, carry the weight of the past, right? Because I think that carrying the weight of the past is probably going to really hurt the present. I don't know, maybe there's more complexities than what this thing is in this answer here. But, I mean, I hope they're not, like, designing practice skills because someone's going to break it with Amanda and, like, reducing them because of that. That was kind of, like, my hope that they were going to avoid. Okay. The Investigator starter decks were released in 2020 and were great designs and have used them to get several people hooked on the game. Will we see new starter decks with new characters anytime soon? That's a great idea. I can't comment, but that would be rad. It would be rad. What has been the biggest oops moment that you only realized after players got their hands on the game? Whether card interaction or scenario mechanic, how much panic does that cause in the office? I was kicking myself when the Drowned City release when I realized we hadn't added an instruction to set aside a certain pesky antiquarian and set up for one scenario. I added on my own to-do list to add, but it slipped through the cracks at the last moment. As a result, the boss of the scenario can emerge way too soon without context, so I'd recommend playing with the errata. Yeah. Yeah. I guess they're like, yeah, it sucks. That's why we issue errata for things. I interpret that like just because stuff is legacy, we can't make weapons deal 3 damage as standard kind of stuff. I think that's a good read of it as well. I think that's a read that I think resonates with what I'm hoping for it more, so I'm going to assume that. I'm going to take that reading as the one. Are there any specific classes that you feel with new context the current format need to be brought into balance with the other classes, and what gaps, if any, does the class need to fill? I love questions like this because I just feel like it's pointed. Like, I think this is a great question. I'm going to just say that right now. But I do feel like they're trying to be like, so what are you going to do to bring Rogue up and Mystic up and, like, Seeker down? I wanted to post, why won't you bring Beard on full time? Well, they're not going to answer that question, so I'm glad you didn't post it. Great question. I think we can see some gaps between the core set and the state of the Rogue class as it exists today. Let's go. See, Duke knew what Fernie was asking. A lot of elements in the Rogue playstyle took some time to emerge, so I'd like to see us address that gap with future designs, especially with the more limited card pool and current. I've said it elsewhere, but I'd also like to see us make Rogues more of the move fast class than Seekers. Seekers are already quite efficient without stuff like Pathfinder and Shortcut. So, this is now like the third thing about movement, and it's definitely gonna be, looks like Seeker is gonna be losing the movement, which I think is good. I think Seeker could have burst movement in the form of like the join the caravan, but I like the just like chip movement falling primarily to Rogue. I think that's really good. What are your thoughts about the Return to content? Oh no! No, why are people still asking about the Return to content? Oh, no. Do you think they were a good addition to the game? I personally love the campaigns. The campaigns can be either fleshed out or in some cases fixed by these expansions. Without going into spoilers, which newer campaign do you think could benefit from Return to box the most? Return 2s were fun. When I was just playing the game, I loved them. New Game Plus. I'd say we still try to bring the spirit of Return 2s into the design of the new campaigns. Return 2s were intended to add replay value and variance of scenarios players felt like they'd master. So when we design new campaigns with other variables, we want to make sure so players have options to re-experience a scenario in a new way or with a new twist on a replay. Yeah, like that's the thing. Just like put the Return 2 in the box is kind of like the philosophy they've been saying they've been trying to do since like Edge of the Earth. I will stand with a lot of community and say I wish we got a Return to the Dream Eaters, not just because Return to the Point of No Return is a hilarious title, but also because I think there would be a lot of possibilities for how we could add to the campaign. I do agree that it's unfortunate that the Return 2s were discontinued before Dream Eaters, because I think Dream Eaters is the campaign that would benefit from it the most. With that said, Return 2s ain't coming back. We just gotta move on. With the forthcoming environment changes, which cards are you looking forward to not have to design around anymore? I said it above, but fine clothes. Does it mean we're not getting the council-designed upgraded fine clothes? I fucking hope not. No, the Dare BK's fan design Return to Dream Eaters is not happening anymore. How do you balance difficulty in a scenario campaign? I think this is a fun question. Do you playtest campaigns with optimized decks, or do you try with more fun thematic ones? We try to do a range. Balancing difficulty is a tough one because so many players come to the game with such a range of experience and skill. A longtime player might breeze through the gathering, for example, while a new player might meet the Ghoul Priest and just give up. So whether you play heavily optimized or thematic, I'd like us to try and shoot for the middle ground wherein most players will feel scenarios winnable, but that it still challenges them and asks them to solve unexpected problems and situations. So I think this is an awesome answer to the question, and I think it makes me feel a little bit vindicated. I've been doing a lot of talking with custom content designers, and I try to stress to them that it's very important to build a campaign that just because your team plays on hard and crushes the scenario doesn't mean that someone isn't going to bring a Mina Zidane and have to solve those same problems. So I think it's very important to have that middle ground and design for that middle ground. And I mean, obviously, you can see they do this in the stuff anyway, but I just feel a little bit vindicated because that's the approach that I've been telling some content creators, some custom content creators lately. At me next time? I mean, I was going to, Astute. You might have even saw it on my face. I was about to say Astute's going to bring a Mina to it. But then I paused and I decided to not say it. But you know what? You're right. I should have stuck to my guns. What's a campaign mechanic that you feel didn't quite hit the mark? And if you were given another crack at it, what would you change? Fun. Okay. Swarming. I love what swarming is trying to do, but I think that if we were to take a second crack at the keyword, we could come up with a half a dozen ways to simplify it and make it clearer, make it easier, and more interesting to interact with. I think this is a good one. I think that's a good answer. Yep. Yeah, I think swarming, I think it makes sense, but it could definitely be cleaner. And I also think that it causes weird feel-bads where people feel like they're losing the card by it going underneath them, but they're kind of technically not losing the card. It's a little bit weird. That's why the game can kind of trick people. But I think that's a good answer for this. I hope Nick gets to this one because I know there's a particular keyword he has it out for. If I'd had more time, I would have developed more reasons for players to leave the path in Hemlock Vale and fight different things in the night versions of the day scenarios. As it happened, we added the option to play day scenarios at night later in development, so if I got a chance to go back, I'd add some extra variance and challenge to the night scenarios, the scenarios. I think that's cool. Concealed is my keyword of choice. It's less that I think it didn't hit the mark in its original implementation. I thought Scarlet Keys had a lot of really fun takes on the mechanic. I just think there are a ton of unplumbed depths to Concealed that I would like the chance to plumb them. Yeah, I think so. I think Concealed is also a little bit underexplored, so more of that would be really neat. When are we going to go to Egypt and get a Mummy's Curse, Pharaoh's Tomb style adventure? Nothing is off the table. Good to hear. My question is broadly about playtesting. When playtesting, what do the cards look like? I mean, are they professionally printed or are they regular paper without even having pictures on them? I love this question. I'm actually very interested in this question. How much time do you generally have to playtest and update card scenarios before they get sent to China for full production? A lot of playtesting is printing, cutting, and sleeving. We don't necessarily start off with the art, depending on where the game product is. The playtest materials can look really rough at first. We generally do playtests with the official frames, even if they don't have art. I do think that when we finally get the art on the card, something clicks into place. As for the other question, I'm not allowed to share internal stuff like that, about timing, etc., but I will say we spend a lot of time playtesting and honing the scenarios. The game can change a lot through the playtesting process. So, this is the other thing, too, that I think is the community doesn't appreciate, right? It's also very true. I know Magic has a little bit of a bigger printing system for it, but this makes so much sense, right? Where they're, Arkham design for a team of now 3 people is more than just, making cards. they have to print out their proxies. They have to cut the proxies that they're playtesting with, right? They have to sleeve those proxies we see here. And I remember in Duke's first AMA, he mentioned how the majority of his time was actually spent writing art descriptions for what was on the cards. There is so much that goes into this game beyond just designing the scenarios. That I think, again, puts into perspective their answers earlier about what would you change about the game if you could. They're looking at it from a very different perspective than we are as players, and I think it's interesting. I love getting that insight. Any chance at all of getting print on demand back? For new players, it would be incredible to be able to purchase old expansions directly and support you guys. I'm sad there's expansions I might never see because I started too late. I wouldn't say there is not a chance at all, so this one's from Olivia, but I can say that it isn't something that will be happening in the near future. There are a lot of discussions about this internally and many factors that play into it, but we haven't yet found the perfect solution for both players, distributors, and stores, as well as our own ability to support this. TLDR, we're not completely committed to it never happening, but we don't currently have plans for it. We are aware of the situation and the sense of loss some players have based on this decision, though, and we're not turning a blind eye to it. This TLDR is basically the same length of the above message, so I'm adding more text to it to make it even longer than the original, and thus completely negating its purpose as a TLDR. That's great. That's funny. But yeah, this makes sense. This is what we've been saying as well. It's just like, it's not as easy as just snapping your fingers and making it happen. And I also like this. There's nothing happening about it in the future, but they can't. They're not gonna say never. Like never say never, but not right now. I can't reply to this specifically, but I'll speak personally that I'd love for us to find a way to let new players play with old content. I understand the FOMO, and it's my dream that we provide all you want and more. Print on demand could be a cool way to do that, though. Yeah, but no plans currently. Let's drink some water. After the turning point that the Drowned City has represented, and now that we have novels on a regular basis, comics, the role-playing game exploring new areas and expanding the lore, ArkhamHorror.com with its weekly articles, and all of it interwoven with the Arkham Files universe. Do you have plans to establish a timeline that situates and places the LCG campaigns, the role-playing game, and the novels? Something like the AHLU, Arkham Horror Lovecraftian Universe. This question came for us because Edge of the Earth campaign and the Terra Antarctica. We weren't clear on the dates when they took place or whether they're compatible or mutually exclusive. I understand there are pros and cons to creating a timeline. For my taste, it would give a thematic boost, and I'd love to be able to go through from an RPG campaign to an LCG one while keeping the investigators and knowing where both sit on the timeline. There's some inconsistency that's difficult to reconcile. Arkham stories generally take place in a nebulous range of late 1920s before the stock market crash in 1929. Wow, we're really 4 years away from 100 years of that. It's not like we're repeating the past, right? It's not going to happen again, right? There's no way. There's no way it's going to happen again, right? At the Mountains of Madness and Other Stories is set in the 30s, however. In general, we've stepped back from trying to determine a specific year for most of our stories, and we'd encourage players to fill in the blanks or justify for themselves. That's a situation where I'd encourage you and your group to decide what you think is most fun and consistent for you, and let yourself tell the stories you want to tell with however you'd like to justify it. There's not a perfect way to reconcile the timelines of the different products and in the larger Arkhamverse. That's not going to stop you and other players from making some wild justifications, and I'd encourage you to do so. If in doubt, time travel or dimensional nonsense always works for us. I'm curious how your LCG characters fare in Terra Antarctica. Neat. Well, I mean, I can't answer that. That's a Bryn question. Yeah, like that's a honestly, this is not the time or place for that kind of question. You know, like he's his own person making his own decisions. I'm not here to influence it or comment on it. So I would suggest you think twice before even bringing that up. It's his own personal thing, his own personal choice. Travis and I don't care. So like, why do you guys, right? Duke, you mentioned in the past having different designers own different campaigns with the other designers supporting, so each campaign had a strong central vision and a variety since the different designers on the team have different tastes. Is this still the case? If so, who is taking the lead on the next two campaigns? I know you can't talk about what those campaigns are, but you can tell us who is leading the vision of them. I love this question, and I'm excited to see the answer. It's definitely still the case. I've pushed hard for us to allow the designers to lead different projects and tackle stories and concepts they find exciting. That said, we all work very hard across different products and try to be there for each other and support, so let's add to each other's designs. We're a team at the end of the day. I don't think it's cheating to say that all that to say I'm lead on the next campaign, and that's all y'all, and they all begin in a Nick campaign at some point as well. I love that. I think that's such a healthy way to make it so. I just think that's great. I think that's a great way to approach design. So I will say I don't comment on the Bryn mask stuff for a reason, but I will say that COVID is still around. In Alberta, our government is fucking crazy and made it so that you could not get COVID shots anymore without having to pay for them. So people are going to be getting less COVID shots, and people might want to keep people close to them that they interact with safe, especially if they have conditions that can make sicknesses like COVID be lethal. And that's what it really all comes down to, right? My wife's a teacher. We have a lot of sickness going through our house. I could be carrying something and not knowing it because I get vaccinated, right? Bryn's just looking out for himself and people that he cares about. That's what it really all comes down to. It's as simple as that. So it's just empathy, right? No, I understand. I understand that people in chat are cool, right? People in the YouTube comments are a little not cool about it. I've had to remove a lot of people from it, but we don't talk about it because honestly, I don't even notice it anymore, right? It's just how it is. I don't even think about it. So yeah, it's all good. I don't even think about it, so don't even think about it yourself. You know, it's nothing. It's just personal choice and all that. Greeting from the Honduras. How do you choose which Lovecraft history to adapt in an expansion? For each of you, what is your favorite Lovecraft history? Heyo, great question. I think when we make a new expansion, we do want to explore an ancient one or part of the mythos we haven't seen done before, at least tackled in a new way. So it partially comes up from us asking, what's the most fun thing? What do we think fans will enjoy? As for me, my absolute favorite Lovecraft story is The Color Out of Space, getting to design Hemlock with such a dream come true, and we follow so many weird, imaginative rabbit trails. Even limited to Lovecraft specifically, I'd be extremely hard-pressed to choose a favorite out of the festival, The Color Out of Space, The Strange High House in the Mist, The Thing on the Doorstep, and The Whisper in the Darkness. If we extend to Chambers, CAS, Clark Ashton Smith, etc., and then choosing becomes impossible, although the entirety of The King in Yellow is a masterpiece and I highly recommend it. As for choosing source material for a campaign goes, I keep several Mythos books, including complete works of Lovecraft, on my desk, and frequently read through for inspiration. When a story idea presents itself, I add it to my ever-growing corkboard of concepts. I think there are at least 8 years worth of campaigns on there already, oh dear. I like this answer. I think Travis would like this answer a lot too. Because it is just... very lore heavy, and I think that's really cool. That's what I've been wanting as well from the game too, and I think that obviously Drowned City is a good return to form. I think Hemlock Vale was a very good exploration of The Color Out of Space as well. I mean, I had my own personal beef with Scarlet Keys. If you like it, I'm happy for you. I like that you like it. So it just didn't work for me for that kind of thing. Whose ally slot does Russell take up? Definitely mine. And he also deals me direct horror every time he comes into the basement. Unless he comes when we're done recording and we're just hanging out and then he gets some pets on the table. I like that. Otherwise, he's a little bit of a nuisance and he's dealing me direct horror while making it so I can't play Peter Sylvester anymore. As a fan who found the game only recently... Oh, this is not an answer to this. Oh, this is just about reprinting. Chill, brother. Does FFG have some insane hire requirements? Because why do you guys have... Oh, that's not a game question. 2 of the 3 developers, after being long-standing members of content creators. Okay, so 2 of the 3 came into this game as developers after being long-standing members and content creators for the Arkham community. Without confirming or denying that you cannot confirm or deny, what card mechanic concept would past you beg present you to design having printed into the game? That's easy for me. Crowbar, and it exists. I do remember in Nick's AMA, he talked about how Crowbar was a dream for him, and he was actually shocked to see everybody, like the tepid response from the community. He would have been like, oh my god, this card's incredible! So, again, puts perspective into how cards are designed and how they work for different people. I remember, for example, even Eric was like, this card is broken. It's crazy, you know? Like, I think that's why Arkham is so good, right? Because it provides so many different people, so many different things when it comes to cards and, like, using those cards. Yeah, I mean, like, that's what Daniel and Pax are doing, right? They're just trying to take Nathaniel Chobar through all those things. I know it isn't, but Chobar sounds like a slur. I can't say it. I can't say it. It makes me feel uncomfortable. What is the current thinking around the support for true solo playstyle? Is it something you consider? Yes, I myself started and played for most of the game's life as a true solo player. I'm constantly looking at what concessions we can make to adjust difficulty across player counts. I can tell you now it is a struggle, but not one I'm giving up on. Nice answer. How soon after a product release are you able to incorporate feedback into the design of the next product, if at all? I know the designers for Magic the Gathering have historically stated they operate on a 3-set delay for player feedback. We generally work 1.5 to 2 years ahead. We love to be more agile, but the process of making and releasing a single Arkham Horror product is a real endeavor that takes a lot of hands. We are always paying attention to the players' thoughts and feelings, and to try to deliver products that we are excited for that will also resonate with the players. Wait a minute. If they work 1.5 to 2 years ahead, and they're doing this AMA while employed at FFG, does that mean, oh, my man, this game's still going to release a product for at least the next 2 years? It ain't dying, so shut up about it dying. We crunched the numbers, we did the math. But then I hear a doomer being like, no, they actually only kept them employed so they could do this AMA. I hate doomers, man. All right. Now that the new play environments are expected to come into effect, this implies that specified products should be available for purchase until they rotate out of the current environment. Does this apply to other languages? In Spain, for example, the starter decks were printed once and have not been reprinted. Players who joined the game in the last 4 years haven't had access to this material. I'm using this example because it's the most important, but we've had years of shortages for some key products for the game, such as the Blob that ate everything. It would be good to clarify whether establishing play environments entails an obligation to keep products available for other languages as well as only English. This is a very good question that I obviously have the privilege to not worry about, but I am still going to read this answer here because I think this is a very good thing to have answered. One sec. This is a great question and is very difficult to answer without literally giving an essay on board game distribution systems. I'll keep it really short, but please know it's a more complex issue than it might seem on the outside. Studios don't have much input on which games regions are available in, which regions a game is available in. This applies equally to languages and to reprints as well as first prints. Ultimately, many game studios make games but don't sell them. So that means Asmodee is the seller, right? This is why you often hear me say things like, if you're interested in a game which is in print and hard to find in your local stores, talk to the owners. See if they have a pre-order list or a general one you can be added to. That is the best way to give information to region distributors that there's a demand for the game. It isn't a surefire way to get reprints of a game. For instance, some are out of print, but it's one of the few ways to have your voice heard. Interesting. This makes this makes a lot of sense, right? Like, this is even news to me because obviously I'm ignorant for this kind of thing. I haven't published or tried to. I never even worked for like a design company or publishing house, obviously. So this is. Studios don't have much input on which regions a game is available in. So they're not the distributor. Applies equally to languages and reprints as well as first prints. Ultimately, games make games but don't sell them. Interesting. Okay. Very insightful answer. And I think that the answer is, unfortunately, like, there's not much that FFG can do. They're just making the games and trying to push the games, but interesting. Is there any chance of converting some of Chaosium's campaigns into Arkham Horror campaigns like Mask of Nyarlathotep or Horror on the Orient Express? Would like to know the logic behind the Scarlet Keys, as I felt that to get to specific events. Certain things had to be done in a specific order to get them. What was the line of thought behind this? I mean, yeah, I can't speak on the development process of Scarlet Keys because I was not on staff when it was being made. Regarding the adaptation of Chaosium campaigns to the Arkham Horror, I think everyone on the Arkham Horror design team is far more interested in seeing what original ideas we can bring to the mythos, or what elements of Lovecraft's stories haven't been explored yet. After all, if you want to experience such awesome campaigns like Mask of Nyarlathotep, you can find a group, in person or online now, what an age we live in, to play with. I mean, it's true, right? Those are different stories from different, like, companies. Why tell those stories? Why not do something a little bit more interesting with it? Is this question? No. When is Nick finally going to give us a new shotgun card? A shotgun is never late. It booms precisely when it needs to. Amen. Could you share some examples where the larger card pool constrained your design and, for example, made you nerf a card pre-release because it could have broken the game? What concepts are you excited to try out again now that there's much more design space free? Fine clothes. So many parlay cards, and I'd say snare mechanics had to be designed with that card in mind. I'm excited to see where we can take parlay if we don't have to answer that suit. So this is what you were saying, Volkloss, earlier about how this implies that they are not worrying about those past cards. But there's a more complex balance that obviously we aren't privy to, which is like where Nick's answer came in earlier. Okay, that gives me a little bit more hope. That gives me a little bit more hope that I was wrong earlier for that. Have you ever thought about a product where the campaigns are shorter? For example, a box with three-part games or a box of one-shots. This will allow for a game group that can't commit to larger campaigns. I cannot speak on future products, but we're always thinking about what we can do to change up our current products. This is, yeah, we had that answer already. What are some inspirations from video games that inspired you to make a scenario mechanics or inspired in making theming? An example being like Hemlock Vale and the Majora's Mask. I've said in a previous AMA, but the Inescapable was inspired by the Nemesis from Resident Evil 3, and the Court of Ancients was inspired by the Kuomori boss fight in the Shadow of the Colossus. Court of the Ancients, that's the elevator, right? There are plenty others, but I can't get into them at the moment. That's cool. I like hearing where inspirations come from. Like, I'm pretty sure the Drowned Quarter was inspired by the Water Temple from Ocarina of Time. Is there any aspect of the game that you yourselves house rule when playing Arkham for fun? It could be a card effect, game rule, strange occurrence. Just an example, like the Taboo, does I have personally house rule banned a few cards, for instance, the Red Clock, which I think break the strength balance of the Investigator decks. We're playing the Scarlet Keys right now, and I've house ruled the Last Blossom Key because I think healing effect is far too strong. My rule is that heals only one Investigator present. I know some people house rule Ancient Evils, although we don't do that. So anything of this nature. My house rules, I give myself one token pull per scenario that I can just walk back. Just one. Also, when I draw weaknesses, I draw 3 per deck and choose the one that fits the Investigator the most. I try not to go for softer weaknesses, but literally ask myself, do I think Joe Diamond is more paranoid, would have an internal injury, or is overzealous? Would you wish to explore other IPs with the Arkham Horror LCG gameplay? It's kind of unique, but I think it could be expanded to other genres. I think we really love the game. We often think, oh, I wish I could play this other property using the mechanics of this other game I love. I myself do this all the time with video games. Give me my Mass Effect game in the style of XCOM now, you cowards. In reality, I think that we as designers would love to see any property being made into a game to be crafted from the ground up to provide an experience that is devoted to that property. Just like how we went from Lord of the Rings to Arkham to Marvel Champions and FFG cooperative LCGs, none of them were just reskins of older designs. They share some DNA, but they are each designed by their own unique experience to play to the strengths and tone of the themes of their source material. Yeah, I think that's the answer. Why just play Arkham Horror like, but it's Star Wars when, like, they could design a Star Wars LCG. It just makes more sense and is ultimately more interesting, right? Yeah, that's what custom campaigns are for. How would you describe the shift in design ethos and method with the introduction of the current format? What sort of new things does it enable? Does it present any additional challenges? Also, when will we start seeing content design with the current environment in mind? I.e., will the next set reflect the new design approach, or was that finalized too long ago? I already answered a similar question to your first up above, but as the second question, starting next year, you will start to see products that were designed with the expectation of multiple play formats. That's hype. When designing new content, what role does the established lore play into your work? For instance, when readers last saw Andy Van Nortwick prior to the start of the Drowned City, he had no relationship with Randall, but the campaign picks up with him under his employ. It's largely designer discretion. We will often indulge in other mythos media and go, hey, that person is cool, let's maybe try and use that. Regarding Andy and Randall Tillinghast, we wanted to really cement the idea that Randall was capable of leveraging his seemingly limitless resources to hire just about anyone. Andy and Ruby are characters with a lot of their own stuff going on, but Randall was able to convince both them with the brief excursion to the South Pacific was worth their while. Okay. First, I want to thank you guys in the name of my play group. We are meeting every Tuesday for about a year now and already made so memorable memories of funny, tense, exciting moments in this game. Playing Arkham is something we are looking forward to every single week. Since we also occasionally play Mans of the Madness, I was wondering, did you guys ever think about adding a traitor mechanic into a scenario? Maybe an investigator becomes possessed or secretly learns new information and is suddenly forced to work towards a different goal than the rest of the team. I think that could lead to some hard choices for everyone or even different campaign endings for the investigators. I think this is an interesting interesting question. I think that the traitor mechanic is hard to implement, and I think it would have to be something that this is a cooperative game, so it shouldn't change it too much. I think it could be explored, but it wouldn't be something where they're going against the team, but they're just like having a side objective that they're working towards. And if they complete it, like, maybe they carry, like, darkness with them or something like that. I don't know. I think Arkham Horror is a fertile ground for adding a competitive variant, be it team play or hidden traitor or whatever, but the game is already a well-oiled machine designed specifically around cooperative play. Adding any sort of competitive element to a scenario or product would require a very deft hand and a very dedicated design effort. Not impossible and absolutely cool if we ever decide to go that route. Nick's answer was wise and carefully considered, so I don't really have anything useful to add, but I will say that I'm a massive fan of social deception games, and the prospect of a traitor mechanic is one I would absolutely love to experiment with someday down the line. It will be no small undertaking, but trust me when I tell you about just about any crazy thing you can imagine to do with the game, we've considered it. Our full-time job is imagining cool new things for Arkham to explore, and we're always looking for new ways to surprise you. Is there any hope for a true digital version of the game? Always hope, but can't comment or guarantee anything. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious. What is your favorite part of the game and designing for it? What's the biggest obstacle you face? Campaign design is my favorite part. Creating interlocking scenarios and weaving the threads, both narrative and mechanical, between each scenario is so intensely satisfying. My biggest obstacle is designing new survivor cards. Just what the heck is that class supposed to do? Good thing I have Duke and Reed around to help. For Reed specifically, but I'd like to get answers from Nick and Duke as well. Any revelations that you would like to share in the vein of expectations versus reality since joining the Arkham Horror LCG design team? For everyone with past vocations, career jobs that are not related to gaming, we could say impacted your major design choice of a scenario, campaign, or player cards. Great question. Expectation. The game designer is in charge of the entire product from start to finish and makes all the decisions regarding its final form. Reality. There are a number of teams of people involved in every product. Nothing is a solo endeavor, and nobody is an island. Makes sense. View more comments. I think we're nearing the end. Answers are getting a little bit more sparse. As someone who used to work in Hollywood, even my incredible high hopes for working at FFG, I somewhat expected a lot of the same problems I'd encounter on previous projects and teams. No real collaboration, no real support from your support staff, hostile and aloof business people at the top of the totem pole, no appreciation for the creativity of the people working on the product. I'm incredibly pleased and fortunate to say that none of that is true. This is easily the most creative workplace I've ever been a part of. The collaboration is amazing. The team is amazing, both the immediate design team and the many folks in production, GD, marketing, leadership, editing, etc., whose hard work is vital to making these games possible. And I've never been happier doing anything anywhere in my entire life. That's great to hear. Creativity runs up and down the entire company structure. We're all just a bunch of board game nerds who spend every waking minute talking and thinking about board games. It's heaven. Man, if there's ever was a sales pitch to come work at FFG, that's a pretty good sales pitch. Gushing aside, I guess, I'd say that a big part of my inspiration actually comes from the place I grew up. I was born and raised in Lovecraft country, specifically Gloucester, which is the modern day, basically a cross between Kingsport and Innsmouth. Oh, I'd love to see that place. So the New England setting is a huge part of my love for this game. I try to channel my history and affection for the place I work to and I'm doing into this game. Yeah, it seems like Reed, I think it's going to be obviously very passionate. They love to see it. How much does the subreddit generally affect the game design? We steer clear of fan content as a rule, but we do keep an eye on the subreddit for questions and to see what people are talking about. I think keeping an eye on the discourse and community is very important to how we approach the game. We technically have an investigator, Hank, who has a base 6 combat. Do you think that we'll ever see an investigator with base 6 willpower, intellect, or agility? If so, how would you balance them? The decision to make an overly pointy investigator, high single stat, low to average stats everywhere else, is always a tough decision. We don't ever want an investigator to feel like they have a huge advantage over the mythos simply because they have a really high stat where it counts. We always want to make sure they have a need to leverage the tools available to them for the class in order to get stuff done. That is a long way of saying I wouldn't expect to see a 6 stat investigator again for a while, and thank goodness for that. Because Hank Sampson isn't really a 6 stat investigator. He's a 5 stat investigator that you can turn into a 6 stat investigator. I would puke if we got a 6-book investigator. They could never do that. They could never do that. Unless there was a downside that said, if you get a clue, you are immediately killed. How many years in advance do you work? 18 months. What is your favorite single card in the game? Shotgun. Yeah, this looks like this is just Nick answering at this point. So I think we're definitely reaching close to the end. Considering that Pat's Carcosa is consistently the highest rated campaign to date among the polls, that would say to a new player who's... Sorry, let's read that again. Considering that Pat's Carcosa is consistently the highest rated campaign to date among polls, what would you say to new players who have now next to no chance to being able to experience that campaign since 7 years of content is no longer in print? Man, this is why I know I couldn't be in the design team, because I'd be like, what are you talking about? Yeah. I cannot speak on the plans for the future product line. What I would say to new players who miss some products that are no longer available: sorry, it sucks that you want to get something you only have the option of the secondary market. Trust me, I've been there. But luckily in the case of Arkham Horror, you have all the new products the design team is cranking out to look forward to. Even if it's difficult to find older products, at least there'll be new products releasing it for it every year. It's a very good answer. With older investigators being rotated out, does this mean reusing card pools might be a thing with newer ones? Yeah, anything is possible. All right. Oh, right here. What's the most damage you've ever dealt to an engaged investigator with a failed attack? 5. Gloria's Clairvoyance didn't see that coming, I'll tell you what. When I build fighters to play in my free time, I tend to come with them at very weird angles. Ancient Stone Harvey, Vamp, Rita, that sort of thing. They generally don't have the ability to collateral other players, so I think my numbers are pretty low. Although they've been definitely picked up recently with all the internal playtesting. Sorry for killing you that one time, Nick. It was mostly the retaliate enemy's fault. Amen. Oh yeah, I joked this about Bryn. There's a pizza card. Never say no to food assets. Have you listened to BBC's The Lovecraft Investigations? The 2 lead from the show, Kennedy Fisher and Matthew Hewitt, make great Arkham investigators. I love Lovecraft Investigations, and I know Duke has listened to them, but because he introduced me to it. With the original roster of investigators from Arkham Second Era all accounted for at this point, can you speak about what we can expect for investigators in the future? Will we primarily see new characters? Does the shift to the current environment mean we can see alternate versions of legacy characters that have rotated out? Any hope of seeing characters created for other Arkham File games like the Unfathomable roster making their way to LCG? Semi-related bonus question: could we see unique allies as investigators or investigators as allies? Nothing is off the table. There's no telling what you can expect going forward. Well, there is, but I can't talk about future products. Rest assured, we're exploring many different options. I mean, I'm not too surprised that this is just how it is, right? Like, I mean, a lot of these answers are, yes, we've thought about it, but I think that there's going to be, I think that those answers are basically like, yeah, it could happen. We can't say if they are or they won't be, but there's a lot left to come for Arkham, and we're going to do our best to make it exciting, right? What are some themes and mechanics that have been neglected for player cards that you would like to see explore in future sets? Also, favorite investigator. Joe, Diamond, and Rita Young, they constantly jostle for first place, and frankly, Rita is usually winning. As far as mechanics, I like to explore more in upcoming player card sets. If I told you, then it wouldn't be a surprise, would it? Suffice it to say, there are some very fun, niche, or unexplored mechanics the game has touched on previously that I'd love to see a deep dive on, and have lots of plans to do so. Alright. I think that's... Oh, no, there's one right here. Oh, there's a bit more, actually. When you see people's deck, do you ever wish there was more variety? My personal experience has been that players use a core of cards in every deck because they are too good to omit, regardless of whether they are thematic, flavorful, or fun. Conversely, fun and thematic cards are left out because they are not as good or too much of a luxury, leading many players to use fairly similar optimal decks. When you design a campaign, is these kind of deck player cards you have in mind, or do you try to cater to more fun thematic ideas? So I think for the first answer, no matter what, the designers can't stop players from building that way, right? This goes back to the idea of the player archetypes that exist in the game. No matter what, there's always going to be a Timmy. There's always going to be a Johnny. There's always going to be a Spike. There's always going to be a Melvin, right? There's always going to be a Vorthos. I added 2 more just for fun because there are more player archetypes that we don't talk about on the channel, but they do exist. They're always going to be around. So you actually can't stop players from doing that. There's always going to be a card that the Spikes look at and say, this is the best. And I think the most interesting part of design, and they've talked about this previously, is trying to design for all those archetypes, those player archetypes in mind. I've always bemoaned staple cards, both as a deck builder and as a designer. I will always applaud the player who builds a deck out of cards that they think their investigator would actually make use of from a thematic sense, rather than just piling the 30 best cards of their classes. But I always stick to the plan, so I guess I'm kind of a hypocrite. That's funny. To be honest, my personal experience has been quite different. As a former Arkham DB creator and a member of a playgroup that does a lot of wacky and wild deck building and comprises a wide variety of player archetypes, I'm used to seeing a ton of deck diversity day in and day out. And that's always been a source of inspiration for me, as first as a player, then as a content creator, and now as a designer. I definitely want to support having more weird and interesting decks and more weird and interesting ways to interact with the campaigns. I would encourage the players in your group to try building specifically for theme, or pick a luxury buy they've never been able to justify and commit taking it through the campaign. I think they'll find the card pool deep enough to enable anything they want to do, and even gasp marginally suboptimal build. Then again, I wanted the deck to use Tennessee Sour Mash as its main weapon, so I may be a little biased towards jank. So there reads a Johnny, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But I think it's very important to, again, to know the idea as us as players that, likewise, Spikes are not going to try things that are, like, not they view as unoptimal. Johnnies are not going to be drawn to the things that the Spikes do. And that's just player archetypes. And, like, you can't, like, stop that. If you could choose any IP in the world, which would you most enjoy seeing an Arkham Horror crossover with for fun? I'm a bit of a source material purist, honestly. I think the depths of the mythos are so huge that we'll be able to keep adapting new and interesting stories out of them forever. But if I had to take a break from burying myself in 1930s pulp magazines and choose a crossover, I think I'd pick Discworld. Honestly, I was hoping he was going to say SpongeBob. That would have been really funny. I'm a big purist. For like the source material, I don't want to step away, but if I did, it would definitely be for SpongeBob. That would have been a fun. I mean, this is a real answer; it's not a joke, but that would have been very funny. That would have got me. Mechanics first designer, but I always dye mechanics to fit the theme. Each of the design teams is a bit different. Yeah. All right. Nice. It looks like we're at the end. I do need to find something though. But there was one this. I have to do my own kind of AMA here. Because Daniel pointed me to this question and it kind of made me go, ooh, all right. It gave me a little bit of a cringe. So for this one, there's been a longer content lull this calendar year. Justin from PBG mentioned they are struggling with content. With competing priorities and limited resources, is reducing the lull on your radar. I think the intention of this question is very good. But one thing you got to remember for people who are watching this is my own problem. This is my problem. I make 365 Arkham videos a year. If you do the math, that's like a video a day, right? I do 366 in a year with a leap year, so it is also a video a day. That's my own choice and how I do things. And I think the intention of this is a good question, because I think that we as players should be able to ask, what is there is there a plan to make the Arkham LOL less of a thing, right? And I think even mentioning like content creators, like it's like the statement here is like even like, hey, I want to be more engaged with the game. I want content creators to be more engaged with the game. I think that's a totally fair question and worth asking. But one thing I just want to stress, the lull in Arkham content is my own doing. While yes, having new releases makes it easier to discover and think of Arkham content to make, I make a lot of videos. So that's my own fault for also being like, how am I going to come up with my 45th list video of the year, right? So like that's my own doing. That's just because of how my idea for my own work ethic when it comes to how I want to handle my channel. And that's sometimes where that's sometimes works in my favor and sometimes works against me. And I don't think this is a bad comment. I don't think that this is like a snarky comment. I think this is a very legitimate like question to ask. I just wanted to talk about it because I am mentioned in it. My name is Justin, and I do happen to be from PBG. This was a great AMA. I think that overall, most of the stuff was kind of things that we've heard before. But I mean, AMAs in the long term have like, I can't think of the word, but they like lose, diminishing returns. There we go. But it is nice to get the designer's input. I really enjoyed reading Reed's answers. I think that Reed obviously has a lot of passion, which is incredible to see because it makes me feel passionate about the game. I think that what this all came down to is it's good to see their insight, how they approach things, what their design philosophy is. And it shows that this game is alive and breathing and is the opposite of dying compared to what a lot of people say. So play some Arkham, love some Arkham, and don't worry about Arkham. It's in good hands. I think the design team is going to try to make some cool stuff for you. Whether the cards resonate with you or they don't resonate with you, whether you have a big hit rate for like the pack or like you don't, like even like for me for Drowned City, I think the specialist cards were a little bit lackluster. I think the designs team is still doing a good job trying to explore what the game is, and that's what this AMA was all about. If you're watching this live on Twitch, there is an announcement video. There's an announcement stream tomorrow. If you're watching this on YouTube, you probably already know about that because I already made a video. But I can just say, Arkham Horror, it's going to be an exciting time coming up in the near future. So keep your eyes open. Get ready to see what the hell's going to be coming out of this game, what the design team's cooking up, because I'm pretty sure you are going to like it. And I'm pretty sure I am going to like it. So thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one. And as always, GG's.